Welcome to Life's Tough. Crypto is tougher. Our featured guest today is Anthony Pompliano, an American entrepreneur, investor, and U.S. Army veteran. Anthony is co-founder and partner in Morgan Creek Digital Assets, an investment firm focused on providing access to blockchain technology and digital assets for institutional clients and wealthy family offices. Welcome to the show, Anthony.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right, Pop. So today is the big day, is it not? We've got back launched. Is that correct?
I went live last night. That's correct.
And what do we expect to see? What do you think?
I don't think that we're going to see much change. I think that it's going to be kind of the normal business. It's going to take a while for people to kind of get onboarded and start actually transacting. For me, it's not so much what happens today as much as it is what happens 6 to 12 months from now on the platform and how much liquidity is there. Yeah,
I mean, I think the challenge is that everybody wants it to happen overnight, yet the space is taking much longer. Or I would say from the retail side, on the institutional side, did you think this was going to take as long as it's taking?
Yes and no, right? I think that there was definitely an understanding that there was going to be a number of very difficult obstacles in front of us. It was going to take a while to accomplish kind of the institutional penetration. At the same time, there's days where things happen that I would have never imagined or thought. If you look at something like when we got the public pensions to invest, that happened a lot faster than I thought it would.
And how did you do that? I mean, that group, while they might take some risk, I mean, you convinced them to get into the market that, at least in the past, we called it like the cartel and the mob and the drug scene. Like, how did you convince them to invest?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's a qualitative and a quantitative argument for Bitcoin specifically, and then for kind of blockchain technology industry even broadly. When it comes to Bitcoin, we use a quantitative argument, right? If you put a non-correlated asymmetric asset into your portfolio, there's a lot of positive benefits that occur. You're able to actually de-risk the portfolio in ways because the value drivers of something like Bitcoin are very different than, let's say, your stocks or bonds. And so obviously that quantitative argument or portfolio construction argument is helpful. And then we look at the broader industry. I think there's really kind of two main points. One is there's a lot of intellectual capital rushing in. So you see some of the best entrepreneurs, kind of coming in. And then two is there's an amazing amount of financial capital that's being poured into the space. And so whenever you get a collision between that intellectual capital and financial capital, usually there's pretty significant innovation. And with that innovation comes outsized returns.
And you recently had put on Twitter, $1 trillion market cap. You really think that Bitcoin can get to $1 trillion market cap?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's only 5x from where we are today. I don't think that that's far off at all.
And what do you think it's going to take to get us there? Is this pure regulation? Do you think that there has to be a big moment in the world for, like, I don't want to say the debt side? Like, what is it going to take to get there?
Yeah, I think just time, right? One of the things that I think that we've come to realize is sometimes the best opportunities are the simplest. And if you look at Bitcoin has a number of properties that various groups find attractive, whether it's the non-seizability, the non-censorship, the monetary supply, sound money. All those things lead to increases in demand. And when you have a fixed supply asset and demand increases, supply-demand economics take over, get increases in price.
Great response. Brad, you got a question for Anthony?
I do. Good morning, Anthony. I wanted to ask you, as this market moves forward, I know that Bitcoin has had a couple ETFs submitted, and recently we just saw the VanEck ETF that got pulled. what what's your evaluation of why we can't get a Bitcoin ETF so far?
Pomp, did you hear the question?
I did not.
Oh,
I can't hear him at all.
All right, that's apologies. So Brad Kimes, we're trying to figure out what's going on our audio side. Brad wanted to know why you think the ETF was not it's not going through. What is the challenge, and why isn't it just a simple, all right, let's approve this thing and move on?
Yeah, I think that there's two pieces here. One is that you've got to look at the kind of the decision makers, right? The regulators who are in power right now. They're incredibly conservative, and they've got every right to be. I don't think they're being unreasonable. That conservatism has them focused on protecting the market participants, and so when they take a much more conservative view than maybe others would like them to, they have concerns that need to be addressed before they're going to approve it. Under a different regulatory regime, that may change, but I think right now the SEC is being incredibly reasonable, and they've been pretty clear about what they want to see addressed, and so they'll continue. The second thing is, I want to make sure I call out that the ETF, while important, I don't think that it is as big of a moment as many people think it is, right? There are definitely a number of challenges with purchasing Bitcoin specifically today, and so it can be more difficult than buying other assets. There can be some friction, etc. But it's not impossible, and so there's some portion of the demand that has found a way to get exposure, whether it's through directly purchasing on an exchange or something like Square's Cash App, or even through like a GBTC type product. And so when the ETF gets approved, I expect there to be demand. I expect there to be, some impact in the market, but I don't know if it's necessarily kind of a ETF gets approved and next thing you know, Bitcoin quadruples in value type situation.
Yeah. And in terms of companies that we should be watching in the market right now, in addition to Circle, who's on your list?
Yeah. So around Bitcoin specifically, I think there's a number of companies that are doing some really great things. Everything from Samurai Wallet to a number of the exchanges. Kraken doesn't get really talked about as much, nearly as much as I think they should. And then a company like BlockFi, which is building out lending and
cool
interest accounts and things like that. And then you've got CoinMine, and some of these that we were investors in, some of them that we're not. But the other company that I continue to reiterate to people, I think one is a great company and is growing very quickly, but two shows kind of the future of a lot of this is Figure Technologies. So they essentially have digitized mortgages, and they've been able to elicit the support and participation of a lot of major Wall Street firms. And what it does is it goes back to this thesis that we've had from early on that every stock, bond, currency, and commodity will be digitized in the future. And so when that happens, I think that you'll see a lot of kind of value creation and capture by the people who are building infrastructure in that space.
And on Twitter, by the way, you have quite a way of getting people to get excited. You throw out those blanket little tweets. Do you expect the reaction you're getting? And I assume it makes you chuckle at times.
Yeah, so definitely I'm having fun. No doubt about that. As long as I'm having fun, I'll kind of keep it up. But,
I'm like, there's Pomp. Look at him go at him again.
Yeah, and look, part of it is, I use Twitter in a multitude of ways. One of them just being it allows me to test my ideas and really kind of see, how people react to certain things and kind of measure sentiment and things like that. So it's super valuable for that. The second thing is I think that we don't talk enough about kind of the marketing and the message of Bitcoin, right? It's really important that we share that message and we kind of get it out there. And so, I like to think that I'm doing my part there, and hopefully we'll kind of inspire some other people or give them confidence to do the same.
Yeah, and I know that you cleared it up a few times. We'll also help you clear it up a few more times. Investing in Bitcoin, is that something that you personally do? Or do you stick to the retail side and support the companies that use things like Bitcoin?
No, so I've publicly stated it before that obviously from a professional standpoint, we have two investment theses. One is that people will trust algorithms to store their wealth over other humans. So Bitcoin is a kind of a culmination of that. And then every stock, bond, currency, and commodity will be digitized. So that's how we deploy capital professionally. Personally, like I said, I've publicly stated that over 50% of my net worth is in Bitcoin. And again, it's not because I look at it as a speculative trading asset, but I see that there's two alternative financial systems, right? They're kind of opposites of each other. One is an inflationary, kind of heavily leveraged system. The other is a deflationary digital system with very little leverage. And so I choose to, store more than 50% in that alternative system. As a hedge, if you will, against legacy system,
sure.
But also as a way to get exposure to what I think is an attractive monetary policy.
Now, in terms of Bitcoin, is there a reason why you focus all your efforts just on that? I mean, we had Roger Ver on, and he said he was talking about the top 20 that he's in. Do you support other projects as well, or is Bitcoin really the thing that, again, when we talk about, I always say when it comes to same thing with religion, that everyone believes theirs is the only one. Isn't that the case? Like, you go online, all the maximalists, like, they believe every single token on the planet. Like, no, I'm telling you, this is the only one that's going to make it.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't spend your time all day looking up 2,000 different tokens, right?
So I'm definitely not a maximalist in the sense that Bitcoin is the only thing that will accrue value. I think that there will be plenty of things that accrue value. I just tend to think that a large majority of things are not going to retain the value that are out there on the market today. It's kind of like the early internet. If you go back to the late 90s, a lot of the ideas that ended up being highly successful companies were tried in the late 90s. So you had food delivery, music streaming, all of these things, but those companies failed. And then 10 years later, the applications were built on top of the internet. And so I think, we just got to be really careful about timing, right? It's kind of the saying of if you're early, you're wrong. In many cases, not always, but in many cases. And so right now, I'm kind of cautiously optimistic about a number of things outside of Bitcoin, but Bitcoin is my main focus, and the reason really is again going back to the monetary policy and that alternative financial system is built with Bitcoin as the unit of account.
You're saying that Bitcoin is being used behind the scenes, and everything's being tied to it.
Yeah, it's just, I look at there's two financial systems, right? There's the legacy system that is inflationary and heavily leveraged and with fractional reserve banking. And then there's the kind of the Bitcoin system or the sound money system. And so I choose to, store my wealth, right? Again, if it was a speculative asset, that would be one thing. But I really do think that there is this mindset shift of folks that if they want to participate in that second financial system, then they're going to need to own that base unit of account, which in my opinion, and I think many's opinion, is Bitcoin.
Yeah, and in terms of the other providers in the market, one of the other question we had, and I said, all right, I'll ask him, and he can duck and dodge it if he wants. XRP, what do you think about XRP? And yeah, no, this is the hard one of the day. What do you think about XRP?
Yeah, so look, frankly, I'm very confounded, I think, by XRP, mainly in the sense that I think the software company behind it, Ripple, is obviously what their ambitions are makes a lot of sense, right? They would like to help banks transfer money more easily. That seems to be a very rational perspective and something that if you've ever used a bank, can be painful. I think where the questions come in, and I probably lack understanding, is how XRP is needed in that process, right? And so I always say that if people could mentally separate Ripple, the software company, from XRP, the token, I think that there would be a lot less kind of backlash against Ripple, the software company. I think a lot of the backlash and the controversies around that token, some of it's around how it was sold, some of it's around how it's used today. And so, look, crypto and the Bitcoin industry is really unique in that there's some tribalism that goes on.
There is quite a bit of tribalism.
Yeah, and I frankly think that a lot of people are just bored on the internet. They're looking for something to be outraged about or something to support, and so you get these kind of very enthusiastic groups, both for pro and con, and it kind of plays out and let the market decide.
Yeah, no, a great response. Back to ETFs. Do you think ETFs can help to calm volatility, being that we already have futures and getting price discovery off BTC itself?
Yeah, I don't think that it hurts necessarily. But again, I don't know if it's this huge moment that everyone is waiting for. So I'm kind of the belief that we should have an ETF. I think that it could be very important, but I don't think that we should pin our hopes and dreams on an ETF being kind of our savior, if you will.
Yeah, and permissionless ledgers. What do you think about it?
Permissionless ledgers.
Yeah, like where coins are placed on for regulatory purposes and defined, and bringing consistency and settlement time.
Yeah, I mean, look, again, you're going to get. Here's the thing about the market, right? And we can kind of go through each individual thing that people are doing, but the one thing that I do think is really important is. We should encourage as much innovation as possible in experimentation, right? And the reason why that's important is because there should be no sacred cows.
That's right.
If you kind of if you encourage innovation and experimentation, I think we'll be surprised by what's possible, by what people can actually build and create. And so I'm very much in the camp of we should encourage all of this. But along with that, I also think that I tweeted the other day that at the edges of innovation, there's a lot of failed experiments. Right, so we're trying to build new things, and so we shouldn't be surprised when things fail. But failure isn't necessarily a horrible thing. It's just part of the process.
And you went from the military to crypto. I mean, how did you go from one extreme to the other? I mean, that's quite a jump in just in general. I mean, going from one set of standards to now to an industry that doesn't have regulation, that has not been. Yeah, I mean, it is different.
Yeah, I tend to think that it's very, very similar. Frankly, it's one of these things that that there's people who have ambitions. They see a world that they think can be improved, and they work hard. They're disciplined. They're smart. And so I think there's a lot more similarities than people realize on the surface.
Yeah, no, well said. And when we had Roger Ver on the other night, I asked him, I said, Roger, I tell people all the time that cryptocurrency, also Bitcoin, is single-handedly one of the greatest opportunities in your lifetime to build generational wealth. He said, I 100% agree. What do you think, Pomp?
Well, one, I definitely agree. But two, I think even bigger and more important than that is Bitcoin specifically has the chance to reset what I think is one of the biggest atrocities of kind of our time, which is the structural the structure of the financial system, which causes massive inequality, right? The inflationary system that is something that has driven a wealth inequality gap because of the ability to print money seemingly unending.
Yeah, didn't they just print money this past week where they're giving it away?
Yeah, so look, it's you're talking specifically about the repo market, I think, and it's probably not as bad as people would like to think. I've seen numbers that people are throwing out where they're throwing, they're speculating that they're injecting hundreds of billions of dollars, and if you accumulate that, you can get some pretty big numbers. But actually, what's happening is between $50 and $75 billion a day is essentially being used as a revolving credit line. To me, it's less about the ability to count up the numbers as it is in many cases. Some of these banks are paying double-digit percentage interest on overnight money. Wow. Right, so 10%, and so what that tells me is that there's something going on, and frankly, I don't understand it well enough to have a kind of fully formulated opinion. But something's going on when you're willing to pay that type of interest rate on overnight money. So I tend to think that there's probably a much bigger scenario or problem there than we realize.
It sounds bigger. And do you think Bitcoin can prevent the next crisis?
I don't know so much if Bitcoin's going to prevent a crisis as much as it is it's kind of the plan B, right? I think the meme that's been going around on Twitter actually is pretty clever in that previously no one had an escape hatch, no one had an eject button, right? And so when there is a crisis, where do you go? That's been one of the major problems, I think, historically. And so, really now what we get is we get a competition of financial systems. And inside that competition of financial systems, people have choice. And so, from my perspective, at least, free market competitiveness is good. And if there is a crisis in the legacy system, we're going to see, do people choose to ride it out and kind of put their faith and trust in central banks to cut rates, print money, and kind of deal with the issues and try to recover? Or do they choose to kind of get up and it's almost like being on the playground, right? Yeah. And you pick up the ball and go play at home,
yeah,
right?
Exactly.
And kind of see what people choose to do.
And what do you think it's going to take to calm the volatility of Bitcoin?
Look, I don't really think that the volatility is an issue, right? I think actually what ends up happening is you're talking about an asset that has gone from, nobody using it to tens of millions of people using it, and it's looking for price discovery. And so it's actually been pretty predictable, right? If you look at, there's folks on Twitter. I think one of the accounts is at 100 trillion USD. Look at Trace Meyer. A number of these people, these stock to flow ratios and things, they've been able to predict with pretty good accuracy. And so when it comes to the quote unquote volatility, what you see is there's not a lot of electronic trading that goes on. There hasn't been a lot of futures or ability to short historically. And so you get pretty clean technical analysis because it's driven by human emotion, right? So when price goes up, you get a bunch of people who run in, they're kind of chasing returns. They're looking at it as a speculative asset. You kind of get over, the price gets over what's likely to be some sort of value measurement. And then you get these deep bear markets, right? But those bear markets bottom out at a higher low than previous lows. And so you continue to get kind of this net gain up and to the right, which I think is attractive and exactly what I would expect from an asset that's kind of growing for the long term.
Yeah, and when you saw the president get on TV and talk about Bitcoin and some of the others, obviously calling it Bitcom, Maxine, did that make you go, wow, I saw this before they did? Remember, you were the early adopter. They're all coming in now.
Listen, I'm always very careful to tell people I by no means was early to Bitcoin, right? I think that there's a handful of people who deserve all the credit for seeing Bitcoin early, believing in it, understanding it, and frankly having the courage and conviction to put real dollars at risk and elect to use it. And so those are the people who should get all of the kind of benefit and glory of being early and the risk that they took. I merely came in much later, and frankly think that my small contribution to this space is pales in comparison to many of those early people who were much earlier.
Yeah, and Bitcoin, do you see it remaining or staying as a store of value, or do you see it being used in other use cases?
I think you can't have other use cases around money unless you can act as a store of value first. And so I think it's acting exactly as I would expect it to act if it's on kind of this war path to become a global reserve currency.
Yeah, and one of the final questions I have for you is, who do you look up to, Pomp? I mean, there's a lot of people in the space. Like me, get to talk to a number of the big influencers. Who do you look up to? Who do you say, man, Dustin, this person, gosh, they're brilliant, or wow? What do you think?
I would say my partners and my family. That's pretty much it.
Your partners and your families. Fantastic. All right, well, I told you this wouldn't be a burden. It had to be simple. Pomp, any final words you have? We're in 74 countries, and probably not as many as you are on a weekly basis, but any other final words you have for the retail investors out there or the people looking to get into the space? And there's a lot of FUD. I got to tell you, I got a lot of respect for you. I know a lot of people take shots at you online. Somebody, by the way, I put something online the other day of one of our videos, and someone said, what a punchable face. I mean, it was one of the first times I looked at my wife and went, you got to be kidding me. What is this? You still keep going. You don't quit. You don't give up. And that's the part that I respect about you, is you tell people what you believe and what you think, and you're passionate about it. And so final words for us?
If if people saying I have a punchable face is the worst they can say, then I'm having a pretty good day.
They weren't saying that about you. They were saying about me. So if they saying that about you too, I'm like, we're in the same boat, man. I thought I was the only one getting shots taken. I'm like, really? Punchable face? Who are you? XYZ 30598. At least I don't hide. Like, you know, his name is Anthony Pompliano. You know, my name is Dustin Plantholt. Like, we don't hide.
Yeah, look, the internet loves a good shit talking session.
They sure do. And by the way, I missed your shirts that you had online the other day. Man, those look fantastic.
Long Bitcoin, short the bankers.
Oh, I love it. I'm waiting to bring one. I got to find one of those to bring to the gym. And so that's my buddy Pomp right there.
All right, guys. You guys have a great day.
Hey, thanks again, Pomp. Appreciate it, brother.
All right, bye.
Bye. What an awesome
Fantastic.
guy. What a fantastic guy.
Really is, man. I got to tell you, everything, you know what I mean, that he laid out, you can just hear how genuine he is and what he really does feel about the space and Bitcoin itself. I mean, he's got me pumped up.
Yeah, no, he absolutely crushed it. He's genuine, he's honest, and you can see the guy's got integrity.
He really does. A lot of integrity, and I just want to appreciate his service, by the way, as well. So I want to drop that in.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're still on. So tell me, what do you think going forward? What's going on?
Well, you know, I think it's interesting because, you know, he does point out the store of value and being able to maintain. And he talks about, actually, he talked about you got to have that store of value before you can re-enter the space as, let's say, an everyday transacting currency is what he pointed to today. I would tend to agree with that. Now, you know, I would say, you know, not to be combative, but the volatility, for me, is an issue for it to become an everyday transacting value, which originally was the original goal of BTC to begin with, right? So I see long term, something has to happen there, and I believe that's why we spoke and asked questions about the ETFs. I think the ETFs are a great counter product to the futures contracts that are already out. You know, futures being able to short and calm the market that way, ETFs being able to grow the market with long money. I think over time, these two products together can absolutely begin to not only fill the pool, but calm the sloshiness of the pool, right?
Yeah, no, I think you said it best to end us out. You know, we've got a market that needs additional clarity, but we also have a space that can create generational wealth. People like Pomp, people like yourself, people like Roger Ver, and the Jesse Lunds of the world. People that are out there telling a story before others are ready to hear it, taking the risk, putting their money where their mouth is. I mean, on Twitter, many people talk about, does he really invest? I mean, he just said, I took half. I have half of my net worth in Bitcoin itself. And it is easy to become a tribalist or a maximalist in the space. But when we're looking at cryptocurrency, find the one you're passionate about, or the few you might be passionate about, and learn as much as you can about it. And challenge your belief system, challenge your views. Don't you agree, Brad?
I completely agree. And you know, that's why we even asked about, you know, some point regulations maybe taking us to a permissionless ledger or something of that nature, because as this market grows from a nascent emerging market, we have to try to look ahead and see, you know, there's a lot of inconsistency, not just, you know, as we look at one coin like a Bitcoin or some other coin, for instance. You know, the whole market has fragmentation and inconsistency at this point, and it needs to come together. I think regulation and clarity obviously can give us the opportunity for the market to find that consistency, whether it be a situation of some, like Roger Bird mentioned the other day, some Orwellian notion that, you know, regulation brings us to a place where a lot of coins have to be placed on the permissionless ledger to where everything can be tracked, but then it provides a consistency to the market. And I think things like this, or at least entertaining notions of this nature, can take us to a place where there's no more conversation about BTC having a long settlement time if pre-mined Bitcoin is on a permissionless ledger that settles in 4 seconds.
Yeah. All right. Well said. Brad, thanks for joining us today on Life's Tough,
Thank
Crypto's
you.
Tougher.
Thank you, man. Have a great day, guys.
Hey, you as well. All right, everybody. We want to thank you again for joining us for this edition of Life's Tough, Crypto is Tougher. I'm Dustin Plantholt, your host, here from the Alston Carlisle studio in Baltimore, Maryland. Thanks again for joining us.